to be a woman with disability. We must look, when we are looking at inclusivity, we must look at all those structures of women participation so that we don't leave the young women behind, we don't leave the women with disability behind. We must also bring all of us, ourselves, all of us, inside so that we are able to ensure that everybody is included. I know that sometimes there have been intergenerational tensions between the older women and the younger women. I think this is the time to have those conversations, because we cannot approach elections when we are divided. Generationally speaking, we must continue to have intergenerational conversation where the older women who have been there in politics come on board and mentor the younger women, and the younger women has an obligation also to give the new knowledge they have to the older women, so that we have this intergenerational conversation. Because as we go along, it can be seen a bit slightly that that conversation is needed. We don't want to have segregated groups that we think we belong here and this other one belong here. There's also the divide between the rural and the urban woman, which should also be addressed. What is the knowledge gap, and how do we close the knowledge gap between the rural and the urban woman? There are some that are very far, and there are some that are very near in terms of participation. How do we close the gap with voter information, and we ensure that all information that we are required to get is put out there? What is the role of civil society as we speak here in terms of passing the information and ensuring that every woman in this country and every man is well sized to the conversation as we go to the next election? Finally, to men, I think there's no success in inclusivity of women in the electoral process without the participation of the male gender. That men have a role to play. Majority of the time, you know, when we talk about society, we actually mean men above the age of 35. The society that we say that the society is not allowing are those men, because they hold most of the position of power. So my conversation as I finish is that we really need to have a conversation with the male gender also to embrace women participation. Because when we talk about women, we are actually talking about your mother. We are talking about your daughter. We are talking about your sister. Even before we talk your wife. Because majority of the time when men talk up, say these women, they actually mean their wives. Those are the ones that are seen as these women. But we are all women, and we are all your sisters, we are your daughters, we are your mothers, we are everything. So the male gender also have a role to play in terms of allowing this conversation happen and giving the space that is required, so that as we speak, we are able to really look at the issues that affect participation of women. And one of it is actually giving that space and the grace. A woman may not be as available as a man, but because she has many responsibility, and we know that. But when you have the information that can help that woman to participate better, then you are, as a man, you can do that. And I know for sure in this forum, read by the chair here, who is a he for she, we have a conversation that we can read, that we can do complementary leadership. It's not competition, it's about complementary leadership. There's what men can offer, there's what women can offer, and we join together, we do complementary leadership, and we make our country great again. I wish to stop there.
Thank you very much. That was the commissioner herself. Very passionate about matters to do with elections and electoral preparedness. Now, in the last statement, as they take out this part before we start the conversation, Dr. has just reminded me, I don't know how many of you watch the advertisement, the Gillette, Wembe, Kunyoa, the razor. You watch very closely, that advertisement always uses women. And yet it is men who use the product. So when the Commission is talking about the role of men in matters to do with gender issues and ensuring that women participate, is they're doing it the Gillette way, of saying what is the role of the men when it comes to the question of how women can be able to effectively participate in political processes. So she's asking the same question. As I said before, we have a very interesting panel. I have three sets of panelists. We have governmental agencies, we have non-state actors, and I also have two practitioners, active practitioners in the politics of the day. So this is how I'm going to structure my question, because I need them to react to the presentation that the Commissioner has made, and she has highlighted quite a number of issues which appear as challenges, and she has also given some way forward in terms of recommendations. The questions about information flow, the question about abuse of the gender affirmative action, political parties, patriarchy, legal reforms, GBEV, sport violence, all those issues. So what are the governmental actors first? That is, I'll be asking the registrar of political parties and Justice Nga to be the first responders to first corroborate or highlight some other issues which may be creating the problem that we do have particularly today. So starting with John Cox, the registrar. Apart from your quick and fast reactions to the presentation by the Commissioner, what mechanisms? So I'll add some extra questions. The first is to react to the Commissioner, and then secondly, you can answer also this particular question on the mechanisms that are proven effective in ensuring political parties achieve equitable representation of women, youth, and marginalized groups during candidate selection. So first reaction to the Commissioner, and then you can be able to get to that question. We'll get to the other question afterwards.
Thank you, Mule. As said, my name is John Cox Lodonoko, the Registrar of Political Parties. Thank you, Commissioner, for that very passionate presentation on women, and you were always very passionate. I think I would want to say this conversation about inclusion is one that is a persistent wound of society, I would say. I had an opportunity of attending the CSW for this year and listened to countries across the globe. Each one has different versions of, inclusion of women and youth and all that. And I think for me, I think there are fundamental questions that we need to ask ourselves, Commissioner. One of them is what you did mention. I do not think that it's a lack of legislation. I do not think that it's a lack of the laws to tell us what to do, because we have enough laws to guide. And we created ourselves a constitution that says, not more than 1/3 of one gender should be in any level. But we keep doing against it the whole time. So there is a deeper question: what is the problem? I think those are questions that probably we need to ask ourselves. Where does the relationship she talked about of my daughters and my mother disappear when it gets to leadership? Where does that relationship go when it comes to giving women that opportunity to lead? Does it disappear? Do we feel they are no longer now representing us? Where does the love go to? So for me, I think we may need to revisit our perspective, and I think probably, Commissioner, what you mentioned about what is the conversation with the men. Because when you hear this conversation being talked about, you say, women are not included, this is not, but who is not doing it? Is it the men? Is it all of us? And so how do we address this conversation? Because I think that's where we need to start, so that if it's the men, then what is it that gets lost along the way? One of the striking presentations I had was one from Hungary. And in their dealing with the issues of inclusion of women, what they have done is that they have evolved that process to the family level, so that the issues of sharing the responsibility begins at the family. Children begin to understand that their sisters, their competitors, their mothers, need to be helped in terms of this. So people grow up the value of seeing each other as people of the same. I think part of things you may think about is where do we start, so that then we can grow this. To your question then, what is it that we can do to be able to help this, close the gap between where we are in the political parties? And it's not an easy task. I think the political parties office has, for a long time tried to make the parties compliant. I can say here that the political parties are very compliant in terms of inclusion. Whether you talk about the founding members, you talk about the organs within the political parties, they are all compliant to the two-thirds gender rule. But the question is, what is the impact of that inclusion? What is the value of that inclusion? I think that is where we need to move to, so that then we do not have inclusion on paper that does not translate to an outcome that can make a difference. Because what we are looking for is an inclusion that brings an outcome that is visible, that we can now see women are actively involved and they participate in the shaping of democracy in this country. So as political parties, that part is done. The part that we are now working on, how do we then ensure that parties give us a meaningful inclusion of women and even youth, people who can then be able to start make a difference. And part of that is we are trying to now go into parties, try to facilitate those women that are already involved in the parties, those already in the different levels, and see how we can bring them up so that they are able to take the higher levels of ability within those parties. Of course, there's a difference between when you are a member of a party, now when you want to become a leader, start shaking different circles. And those are the issues that we want the party to appreciate, that this is a time that all of us have to be inclusive in that. Now, I think one of the things that probably we need to look into is it possible that we can move a step further to what I think the commissioner spoke to in terms of having a way of allocation of some safe seats for women in nomination to candidates at different levels. Such that if a party, for example, has a certain number of candidates for MCA across the country, a certain number of seats of those candidates is preserved for the women, especially in areas where that party is strong, so that then they have a rider in terms of getting it easy to get into those positions. And I think the question we also need to ask ourselves, part of our disobedience to this two-thirds gender rule is costing us more. So we have to do the gender top-up, which costs us more than we would have if we had actually complied to what the law tells us to do. So there are quite a lot of questions that need to be asked, but that's one of the things we need to know. But of course, I also want to let us know that political parties are independent institutions, and as an office of the Registrar of Political Parties, we also would not want to micromanage political parties to the extent that they do not have leverage of functioning as institutions. Part of our responsibility is to institutionalize political parties such that they become organs of democracy, which is what this country needs. I keep saying that we cannot expect political parties that are not democratic to give us leaders that are democratic. It can't function that way. If our political parties are not democratic, then we cannot have leaders who are democratic, because each of those leaders we talk about, the president, the MPs, the MCs, all of them are products of political parties. So unless that has grown from there, then we cannot expect to have something different. Like I've been telling the youth and the women, by the time we get to the ballot, by the time we come to choose who becomes the MP, who becomes the president, who becomes the MCA, the choices have already been made. You actually have no choice. Basically, you are just electing from those who have already been chosen. Who have chosen them? The political parties. I mean, when we come to election, you come to decide parties. I mean, when we come to election, you come to decide between candidates who have been presented by political parties as candidates for election. So, I think political education to the public and to the different groups is very key. So we need to understand at what point do these choices begin? Where do I begin to actually make a decision of who becomes my leader, who becomes my MP, who becomes my MCA? And the bottom line is, if you do not start at the political party level, then you are making choices that have already been made for you. You really have no much to decide. Whether you decide to vote for them or not to vote for them, the choices have already been made. So we need to take that to the public. That's why for me, I think political education is very key to the public and to the members of the political parties, including the honorable members seated here. One of the things I've learned today is the short time I've been in office. Some of these members of county assemblies and members of parliament do not even understand their own political parties, which is a big problem. Because if you, as an elected member, do not understand how your political party functions, how do you expect the other members who are not even in the party to understand that? So we have a task. You know, how does your party facilitate the process of democracy? Do you yourself feel that it is doing what it should be? If not, then what are you doing as a member of that political party? So I think the conversation of political education is key, both to the public and to even the members, the honorable members of the different houses and the different political parties. Now, maybe the last, before I hand over.
And before you do that, just add the question of the issue of any concrete plans, any concrete steps which you can get from your office in terms of addressing hygiene in political parties. Because it's one thing to say, well, these people who behave like this, there is a question of patronage and all those kind of things. But is there any concrete steps that can be taken in your office to ensure that there's a kind of instruments which arrest political bad behavior?
Yeah, I think I did mention that, but maybe I should go back to this and say, when in the onset, when we register political parties, part of the requirement is the compliance with the 2/3 gender rule. You cannot register a political party if that list of members you have got is not compliant with the 2/3 gender rule. That's number one. Number two, when you get registered as a political party, that becomes a continuous compliance tool for you to be able to abide by. The third is that when we come to the allocation of political parties fund, if a party falls short of the representation of the 2/3 gender rule and all the SIGs in their membership in the organs, we actually hold their political parties allocation fund until they are compliant. So to that extent, that is there. But I think what I'm trying to speak to is that is internal to the party. But what has not then been done is translating that to an outcome from the parties now to the public in terms of how do we shape the overall democracy. That's what I'm saying. We probably need to move further into allowing or giving the parties a way of, in the nomination processes, can they allocate specific seats? Again, this is something that is not there now. Allocate specific seats to women so that then they're able to ride on that and be able to get to the next level.
We'll continue with that conversation. Let me move to Honorable Justice Jairus. First, your reactions, whether some of the challenges which were highlighted by the commissioner are also apparent as far as the judiciary is concerned. Remember the entire question of election dispute resolution and quite a number of issues which emerged from that. I'm sure Mheshimiwa Miki will discuss some of those issues in terms of the nomination processes and some of the challenges they have in terms of the petition process. So, as you answer that, also from your perspective or the judiciary's perspective, what are the most common challenges encountered in the adjudication of those electoral districts? Take those together. It's on, I think. Just speak to it.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Mule. And thank you, Commissioner Nderitu, for that very informative presentation. My reaction to the presentation